Part 40. Down Dragon's Horde. Jake's POV night had come and gone. I got some sleep, but not much. We slept in shifts, just in case the fire didn't keep all the animals at bay. I was third watch, so I ended up waking up quite early, and I have a bit of a hard time falling back asleep once I'm awake, so I just stayed up and talked with Vindicta since it was her turn on watch. Once the sun came up, we all had some fruit that Suma grew from some seeds stored in my shoulder perch, then headed back down the trail. "Careful on the rocks. They seem more unstable than they did yesterday," I said as I regained my balance after nearly falling on my butt. "No kidding?" Von Pak said. "And here I was about to order Paxus to do a little dance," he said sarcastically. "How is everyone's mana, by the way?" Suma asked the group. "I'm still drained, but not nearly as bad as I was last night," Vindicta said, desperately clinging to Argosa's saddle as she skidded around on the loose rocks. Although she didn't seem to be out of control. In fact, Argosa was the only one of the familiars who seemed in her element. "I am feeling better, but I would have preferred a few more hours of sleep," Von Pak complained. "Jake?" Suma asked. "I'm okay. I've been up long enough to not be too tired," I said. Our journey down the mountain was long, tiring, and did I mention long? Because it was. We had to stop, eat, and rest on 5 separate occasions, much of which I was the only one who could carry all 3 because their familiars couldn't go on. At least the journey down was fairly easy, just time-consuming. It took hours, but eventually we made it back to camp. "Ah, there you are," the drill instructor called out as he landed on a perch near us. "I was beginning to think I would either have to get a search party together or start preparing your eulogies." "Sorry, sir, we got caught," Suma tried to explain, but was cut off. "If you have injuries, go to the medical station for some healing. Once everything is taken care of, you can explain in full. Dismissed," he stated and flew back to the vine hut he came from. "I see his concern for us hasn't dulled his charm," I complained. "We may as well go get checked out. It might be the only break we get until this whole thing is over," Vindicta suggested. We all agreed and went to get checked out. All of them were suffering from life force depletion. Their mana was running dry, but no one had any injuries that weren't fixable. They each had muscle strain, and their wings were a bit battered from flying in the cave and hitting the walls, but nothing bad. "I guess we should go give our report," I said. I started making my way there, and the rest flew arriving much sooner than me. As we all entered the instructor's office, he offered the other perches, then began asking us questions. "Do you want me to make you a seat?" Suma asked me over our private connection. "I'd like to try, if that's okay. I need the practice," I said. She nodded her head and refocused on the instructor. I had seen this done plenty of time, but never tried myself. I started channeling magic, then imagined the vines coalescing and twisting into the shape of a log. Nothing fancy, just a cylindrical bundle of vines. As I pictured this, the plants began to twist and conform to the shape in my head. I was ecstatic by the event, but when I looked around, no one had even noticed. Well, it's normal for them, I guess, I thought to myself. I took my newly formed seat and resumed listening to the instructor and the others' conversation. "And then Lady Suma summoned Sentinel to cover our escape from the cave," Von Pak said. "After which I collapsed the entrance to that area, and she unsummoned him." "And I assume you left the cave after that?" the instructor asked. "Yes, sir," Vindicta said. "After we did, Von Pak collapsed the cavern so that the creatures couldn't follow us." "But I thought you said you were nearly out of mana," the instructor asked. "Jake, Sentinel, lent him some," Vindicta said. "Why do they keep using my familiar name?" I asked Suma privately. "It is a formal meeting. Why do you think Von Pak called me Lady Suma?" she explained. "We have to use our proper names, which reminds me." She said to me, then interrupted Vindicta to address the instructor. "Sir, we have something else to report. Recruit 6 has received a name. Vindicta." The instructor seemed taken aback. "I sent you into the forest on a retrieval mission, and you come back a day late, beaten to the dragons, and with a new name." He sighed. "Fine, I will make a note of it and send off the report to the Royal Citadel." "Thank you, sir," Vindicta chirped happily. "You'll still need to present yourself to the Grand Duke when you return, but until his approval or disapproval, you will be considered a named Neem," the instructor clarified. Vindicta thanked him, and we got back to our report. We spent a solid hour being debriefed, and all I could think the whole time was how much I wanted to go home and shower, but I couldn't just yet. Okay, we'll take a rest for a few minutes. The rest of the recruits are just about to start today's familiar combat training. Part 41, Combat Training. Line up! The drill instructor yelled at all of us. There were about 15 Neem and their familiars currently present for today's combat training, including myself and Jake. I was perched on Jake's saddle, and he had for some reason begun standing incredibly straight. I do not know how he had the energy for it after we had spent all day climbing down Dragon's Hoard. Today's exercise is to train your teamwork, not between your fellow soldiers and medic, but between yourselves and your familiars. The instructor loudly announced, "Look out onto today's training area. You will see several metal dummies. Your goal today is to land 3 attacks on the dummies. To be clear, that is 3 for you and for your familiar as well. You may achieve these attacks as you see fit, but be warned." He stopped talking. The dummy I was looking at suddenly started spinning and floating in the air. Then it began to shoot flames from its center of mass. "These dummies like to hit back?" The instructor concluded his rousing speech by asking who wanted to go first. "I will, sir," one Neem volunteered. I did not know his name, but it was the one with the black serpent familiar. "A member of our last familiar training session's winning team. Step forward, Lorik Isbala," the instructor said. "Take whatever position on the field you'd like and begin on my order." Lorik left his familiar's saddle and flew to a boulder on the battlefield. His familiar went to the opposite end of the field and hid inside a pocket of tall grass. Then the black serpent did something I certainly had not expected. It disappeared. "Now that is some good camouflage," Jake mumbled. "I knew black serpents could do such things, but I did not expect them to be so effective at it," I said, stunned. Seemingly, all of the recruits were impressed with Loris's familiar's ability, so much so that we were all ordered to be silent by the instructor. "Begin!" the instructor called out, and Lorik and his familiar, which was now blending in almost perfectly with the tall yellow grass, went on the attack. Lorik flew high up and then dive-bombed straight at the dummy. Meanwhile, his familiar snuck up behind it. As Lorik was falling, he launched a fire spell at the dummy, engulfing the creation in flames for a moment. Just as he neared impact, Lorik flared his wings, cutting his speed, and pulled up and to the right, narrowly missing one of the contraption's many segmented limbs that were splayed in all directions. Really, it appeared more like a bush without any leaves rather than a training tool, but the fire that shot out of its limb and burned Lorik's feathers told a different story. "Race!" The serpent familiar cried out and launched itself through the air. Its body collided with the dummy and encircled it. Then it unhinged its jaw and sprayed some kind of green liquid onto the dummy before releasing it and retreating back to the tall grass. It had bought its master enough time to escape, and Lorik was back in the sky preparing another attack. This time he attempted to use the ground and the dirt by casting a spell to immobilize the device. Pillars of rock and dirt surrounded the dummy on all sides, then came crashing down on top of it, pinning it to the ground and preventing it from flying away. Lorik wasted no time diving down for another attack, forming another fire spell and slamming the flames into the dummy. His familiar once again came out of hiding, but this time it was not from the grass, but from one of the boulders Lorik had used earlier. It had changed its color from yellow to brown to blend in, but was now dropping its camouflage and landing the final blow on the dummy. "Impressive!" the instructor called out to Lorik and his familiar as they approached and rejoined the group. "Now, who would like to go next?" "Jake, do you want to go next?" I asked him privately. He remained quiet for a moment in thought. "No, let's let someone else go next and see what strategies work best against that thing," he suggested. I agreed, and we decided to wait. "No takers?" the instructor called out. "Well then, I guess," he started to say, but just as he did, a recruit flew up and landed with the rest of the recruits. "Recruit, why are you late?" the instructor yelled. "Apologies, sir," the Neem replied. "I overslept and—" The poor recruit tried to explain, but as soon as he said overslept, the instructor had heard enough. "Oh, were you tired? Well, let's help wake you up. Summon your familiar recruit. You're next in today's battle exercises," the instructor ordered. "Yes, sir," the Neem said meekly. With that, He raised his wings and activated his summoning spell. It was an odd spell, as the magic circle did not form on the ground, but in the air, and we all soon saw why. His familiar flew out of the magic circle, which was floating sideways in the air with surprising speed. However, its appearance was the real shock. "Is that a flying fish?" Jake asked, stunned. "It appears so," I acknowledged, equally amazed. "How's it floating like that?" he wondered. "It's just hanging in the air." "I have no idea. It does not make sense," I stated. "What is it called?" Jake wondered. "I do not know," I said. "I did not hear him call a name. He might not have given it one." "No, I mean, what is its species name?" he wondered. "I do not know. I have never seen a creature like that before, at least not in the air," I told him. "Get to the field, recruit," the instructor ordered. The Neem and his familiar flew over to the training area and took a position together far away from the dummy. "Begin!" the instructor yelled. With that, the dummy began spinning and started to close in on the pair. This is where I realized something I had not before, just how widely varied a battle against an enemy could be. Where Lorik and his black serpent immediately began charging in and attacking the dummy, this Neem and his familiar chose to attack from a distance. The floating fish creature took a position between the dummy and its master, then immediately began attacking the dummy from a distance. It shot bolts of lightning from its mouth, which crashed into the dummy with frightening force. 1, 2, 3 times the creature shot its attacks, and each time it hit with unyielding precision. "A flying fish! That shoots lighting," Jake mumbled, probably as enthralled by the spectacle as I was. "Now he only needs to land 3 attacks himself," I noted. It was then I noticed something interesting. The Neem was preparing to use combo magic. "Jake, do you remember when I told you about combo magic?" I asked. Yes. Why?" he wondered. "I believe you are about to get a demonstration," I said. I could tell what was going on. Combo magic is a technique all mages learn if they plan on getting, or already have, a familiar. We learn it at the academy, and it has 2 telltale signs. First, a magic circle is cast around both the master and the familiar. Second, a wave of mana travels down the circle's connection points from the familiar to the master. Both were occurring between the pair as we watched. The dummy was beaten down, parts were falling off, and it was only inches above the ground now. I could only imagine how much damage it must have sustained between this fight and Lorik's. "O forest, grow and spread at my command, heed my call and ensnare my enemies," the Neem began to chant. "It must be a complex spell if he needs to chant," Jake theorized. In truth, it probably was not nearly as complex as some of the spells I had seen him do, but I doubt he realizes that. "Lightning, flow and penetrate this forest, become whole and roar." As soon as he finished his chant, vines erupted from the ground and entangled the broken remains of the dummy. Once it was immobilized, the vines began to explode. One by one, they detonated and released bolts of energy in every direction. In moments, the fight was over and the dummy was defeated. "Now, that was cool," Jake smiled. "Indeed, combination magic is a powerful tool," I replied. "Good job, recruit," the instructor complimented. "Now, who is next?" "Suma, I think we should go next," Jake stated. "But I thought you wanted to wait and watch?" I questioned. "I did, but now I want to give it a go." "Jake, remember, we cannot use magic like that. Our combination would," I said, but he cut me off. "I know. I remember what happened, but I don't want to do that. I just think we can handle it," he said confidently. I thought about it for a moment and relented. If Jake thought it was a promising idea, I would trust him. "Sir, my familiar and I would like to go next," I announced. Jake's POV. "All right then, take your positions on the battlefield and begin on my command," he acknowledged. Suma fluttered up to my shoulder and rested on the perch on my armor. "So Jake, do you have a plan?" she asked as we approached the field. "I do. This thing is weak to long-range attacks, and I think I have just the thing to get my strikes in," I told her as I made my plan. "Care to enlighten me?" she asked. I reached into my bag and pulled out a handful of steel ball bearings I had purchased a few days ago after I had an idea for a spell. "With these?" I told her. She stayed quiet for a moment, looking a bit concerned if her tilted head was anything to go by. Jake, I know you are strong, but you realize that training dummy is made of metal, right? She asked. How do you plan on throwing those hard enough to do damage? I don't, I said. I explained my plan to her. She seemed wary, but agreed to go through with it. If everything goes as planned, then we will both get our hits and no problem. We took our positions. I was far away from the dummy, and she was covering me until my spell was done. It was a complex spell, like nothing I had ever tried before, but I was fairly sure it would work. Once we were in our positions, the instructor gave the call to start. Begin! As he said that, the new dummy that had been brought out lurched forward quickly. In fact, it was much faster now than in the other rounds. It rushed at Suma and started spinning its comparatively huge metal arms around. She flew straight up and began her half of the plan. Meanwhile, I began my half. She wasn't much of a fighter, but she didn't need to be. She just needed to buy me some time. "Fly, Crimson Bolt!" she yelled and cast her spell. A lance of fire, just like the one she used when that magistrate attacked us, flew at the dummy. I had expected it to slam into the dummy and score her one of her needed hits, but instead the thing suddenly leaned and narrowly avoided being hit. It was like some kind of spinning top of doom the way it was moving and twirling. "Fly, Crimson Bolt!" she yelled again and launched another attack. Once again, the dummy dodged. While this was happening, I was focusing on the balls and the spell. There are 4 fundamental forces of the universe: the strong force, the weak force, gravity, and the electromagnetic force. Of these 4, I was attempting to manipulate the final one. I had been preparing for this spell for a while now, studying military documentaries about the technology and looking up videos on the internet to gain a better understanding. I started by envisioning the target becoming magnetized and drawing the ball bearings closer at an ever-increasing pace. Then I used magic to create a kind of rail system along the path I wanted the ball to follow. As the ball would go, it would be pulled along by electromagnetism through the air and suspended with my mana. But that is where the documentaries and I began to split. Technology had its limits. Pulling something with magnetism is easy, but switching the polarity at the halfway mark is nearly impossible, unless you have magic. While the spell was pulling the balls along with magnetism, it would also be generating a reversed polarity behind the ball, driving it forwards. "Jake, how much longer?" Suma asked as she dodged a flame attack from the dummy. "Now! Dodge!" I yelled and took aim. This spell was different, unique, and hard to imagine. I needed something solid to picture as I cast it. Suma had mentioned that her people did this occasionally too, so I thought I would try it out. "Railgun!" I proclaimed and activated the spell. If you love engaging stories like this, make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications to stay updated with all the latest episodes from FY Stories.